I used to think Sarah and I had the perfect marriage. We'd been together for nearly 10 years, and everything seemed to be going smoothly. Actually, more than just smoothly. We had a lot in common. We were building our life together, and I believed she was genuinely happy. But recently, something felt off. You know that feeling when things just aren't right? Yeah, that's what I started to feel with her. She became distant, her focus drifting, and I could sense her pulling away. She started skipping family dinners and canceling plans with friends, all while working more hours. At first, I tried to convince myself it was just stress, or maybe something happening at her job. But the more I noticed, the more that nagging feeling grew that there was something else at play. The first sign that something was wrong came when I found this letter she had kept hidden. It didn't seem like a big deal at first, just a few lines about some old friend from her past. Weird, sure, but people keep old things like that, right? Still, it stuck with me. I couldn't help but wonder, who was this guy? Why was she talking about him? And why had I never heard about him in all these years we've been together? That's when I began to feel the distance between us grow. She wasn't the same Sarah anymore. We used to talk about everything. Our dreams, our plans for the future, how we'd get there together. Now, it felt like talking to a brick wall. The late nights at work became more frequent, and when we were together, it was like she barely noticed me. Her excuses? They just didn't make sense anymore. Then I found 2 receipts. Restaurants we'd never been to. Places I knew we hadn't visited together, at least. Fancy dinners, far out of the way. I'm sitting there, wondering, who the hell is she having dinner with? And I'm not talking fast food. I'm talking high-end, white tablecloth type places. She'd tell me it was for work, but come on, who has work dinners 4 nights a week? I couldn't ignore it anymore, so I decided to look deeper. I knew I couldn't confront her without some solid proof. So I did what I had to do. I installed a GPS tracker in her car and put some software on her phone. Believe me, I hated myself for it, but I had to know. I couldn't just sit around wondering where she was going and who she was with. That's when I discovered the hotel. Every few weeks, she'd head to this hotel just outside of town. Not far, just enough to make me suspicious. I watched the tracker show her going there, staying for a couple of hours, then coming back home like everything was normal. It was like she was living in 2 worlds. The more I thought about it, the more things started to make sense. Like how she would react when we were with friends, especially when certain topics came up. One time at dinner, some close friends were joking about old relationships, and Sarah froze. Completely froze. Then, before anyone could notice, she changed the subject so quickly it was obvious. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Things got even weirder when I started receiving these anonymous calls. At first, I thought it was some prank, but after everything else, I wasn't so sure. The voice on the other end kept saying things like, "You don't know the whole story about your wife." They even said she had a double life. What the hell? It was like my whole life was falling apart, like everything I thought I knew was a lie. Then came the final blow, a chance encounter with one of Sarah's old acquaintances. Someone she'd never mentioned to me. We ran into this guy at the grocery store, of all places. At first, it was just casual, but then he started talking about the past. Details that didn't add up. Things about places she'd been, people she'd known, stuff she never told me. It was like learning about a stranger, not my wife. By that point, I didn't even know if I wanted the truth anymore, but I couldn't stop myself. I had to know. I had to dig deeper. What I was about to uncover would change everything. I would question not just our marriage, but everything I thought I knew about the woman I married. It's funny how you think you know someone. I always thought I had Sarah figured out, that I knew everything about her, her childhood, her family, even her past relationships. But after that encounter with her old acquaintance, I knew something was terribly wrong, and I couldn't let it go. Not after the hotel visits, the strange receipts, and those unsettling calls. It wasn't just about our marriage anymore. It was everything I thought I knew about her. So, I started going through her phone. Yeah, I know it sounds wrong, but I had to. The GPS tracker showed me where she was going, but now I needed to know exactly who she was meeting there. When I went through her messages, I couldn't believe what I found. There he was, the old friend, The messages were all coded, like she was trying to hide something. But after reading enough of them, it was clear. They were talking about meeting up, sharing memories of places they used to go. But here's the thing. None of it matched what she'd ever told me about her past. All of it was a lie. It wasn't just about wondering if she was cheating anymore. It hit me. Everything I thought I knew about our life together could have been built on lies. The worst part? She didn't just call him an old friend. She talked to him like they shared something deeper, something more than just a simple friendship. That's when I knew I couldn't handle this on my own anymore. I wasn't going to confront her without all the facts. I needed proof, solid proof, and that's when I decided to hire a private investigator. James was a pro. You didn't ask questions. You just handed him the info. I gave him everything. Her schedule, the hotel trips, everything. And then I waited. That's when the real paranoia kicked in. Every time Sarah left the house, I wondered if this would be the day I'd find out what was really going on. I found myself just watching her, trying to figure out if she was really lying to my face. It didn't take long for James to send me updates, and believe me, the things he uncovered hit me harder than anything I could have imagined. Sarah's so-called old friend wasn't just some guy from her past. He was her ex-husband, the one she claimed she left years ago because he was a bad influence and she wanted nothing to do with him anymore. Turns out, that was another lie in a long list of lies. They'd been in contact the entire time, meeting up behind my back like nothing had changed between them. And get this, she even traveled to see him while she was supposed to be on a work trip. I felt completely sick to my stomach, but it didn't end there. James sent me photos. And not just casual pictures either. We're talking intimate dinners, holding hands, kissing like they were a couple in love. Then came the videos, clear proof that their meetings were not just innocent catch-ups. And it didn't stop with her ex. James found evidence of other men, more hotel meetings, more lies. It was like every time I turned around, I found something worse. I sat there at the table, staring at the pile of evidence James had given me. Photos, videos, everything that proved my wife was playing me. It felt like the ground had been pulled out from under me. I couldn't even recognize the person I was married to anymore. Was anything she told me ever real? The worst part was, I couldn't talk to anyone about it. Not yet. I had to figure out my next move. But inside, I was dying. Our friends were starting to notice that something was off. We'd hang out, and they'd joke about relationships, about secrets, about betrayal, completely unaware that I was living through it. Sarah would be sitting there, laughing along, while I sat there grinding my teeth, holding it in. I remember one day, we were at a barbecue, and one of my friends made a joke about how every wife has her secrets. It was supposed to be funny, but it hit me like a punch to the gut. Sarah was right there, sipping her drink, acting like she didn't have a care in the world, like she wasn't sneaking around with her ex, or God knows who else. I wanted to scream at her, tear apart her perfect little act in front of everyone. But I didn't. I kept my cool, forced a smile, and kept the truth locked inside. No one knew what was really going on. Not yet. After that, things with my friends started to feel different. I didn't want to be around anyone. How could I? They were all in the dark, just like I had been. I was lying to them, just like Sarah was lying to me. It made me sick, and I hated every minute of it. James kept digging deeper, and with every new discovery, my anger grew. I couldn't stop thinking about how I was going to make her pay for everything. But not yet. No, now wasn't the time to confront her. I had to play it smart, just like she did. She thought she could get away with everything, keep me in the dark, but she had no idea what was coming next. After everything I'd uncovered, confronting Sarah right then would have been too easy. I didn't want her to just admit what she'd done. That would have let her off the hook. I wanted to destroy everything she had. Her career, her reputation, everything she built. I was going to tear it all down, just like she'd been slowly tearing down everything we had. But I wasn't in a rush. I was going to take my time. First, I needed to get my affairs in order. Divorce was inevitable, but I wasn't going to let her walk away with anything. I called up a lawyer, someone who specialized in cases like mine. We didn't just talk about splitting assets. We talked strategy. He told me the first thing I needed to do was gather everything in writing. Emails, texts, photos, videos, anything I could use to prove just how deceitful she'd been. It wasn't just about infidelity anymore. It was about making sure she paid for everything she'd done. Then there was Claire. To be honest, she wasn't part of my plan at first. She was just a colleague, young, attractive, sure, but I hadn't given her much thought until she started flirting with me. Little compliments, lingering looks. It didn't take long for me to realize she was into me. And you know what? After everything Sarah had put me through, I wasn't going to turn down that kind of attention. I needed a distraction, and Claire was perfect for that. But more than that, I could use her. At first, our interactions were strictly professional, lunch during work, coffee between meetings. But things quickly changed. I started looking forward to seeing her. The way she laughed at my jokes, the way she'd touch my arm when she talked to me. I knew where this was headed, and I let it happen. It wasn't like I was emotionally involved. How could I be, after what Sarah had done to me? Claire was just another tool in my plan, someone I could use to my advantage. The first time we crossed that line, I made sure to document everything. Every kiss, every touch, every whispered word. I wasn't doing this for pleasure. Sure, it felt good to have someone paying attention to me, but I wasn't naive. I knew this was just another weapon in my arsenal. When the time came, I was going to use it all to bring Sarah down. She thought she had all the secrets. Well, I had a few of my own. But I wasn't just sitting around, waiting for the perfect moment to drop the bomb. No, I was already laying the groundwork, setting things up through my connections. I began to quietly spread rumors about Sarah at work. It wasn't hard. People love gossip, especially when it involves someone who's been rising through the ranks as fast as she has. It started with small whispers about her personal life, comments about her long trips, how she seemed distracted and distant at work. I didn't have to do much. People's imaginations did the rest. I even forged a few documents. Nothing too crazy, just enough to make it look like she was dropping the ball at work. I knew a few people in her professional circle who were more than happy to help her reputation take a hit. I made sure they had everything they needed. Before long, Sarah's reputation began to falter. People started questioning her professionalism, her leadership skills, even her loyalty to the company. All the while, Sarah had no idea what was going on. She still came home, acting like everything was fine, still sneaking off to meet her ex. She probably thought I was too blind or too stupid to notice. But I noticed everything. I was in control now, and she didn't have a clue. Things with Claire continued to evolve. At first, I didn't think much of it, but over time, I actually began enjoying her company. She was easy to talk to, fun, and so different from the cold, distant version of Sarah I had to deal with every day. We started spending more time together after work and on weekends. She thought it was becoming something real, and honestly, I started to feel that too. But I wasn't about to let my guard down, not after what happened with Sarah. This time, I was the one calling the shots. I kept Claire in the dark about what was really going on. She didn't know that she was just a pawn in my plan for revenge. She thought she was falling for a guy whose marriage was falling apart. And maybe, in a twisted way, that was true. But Claire wasn't the focus here. This was about taking down Sarah. As the weeks went on, I could feel things building toward the inevitable confrontation. Sarah was starting to feel the pressure. She'd come home stressed out, complaining about her colleagues being distant and people questioning her decisions. She couldn't figure out why her career was suddenly on the rocks. And all I could do was sit there, nodding, pretending to be the supportive husband while secretly pulling the strings behind the scenes. But I wasn't done yet. No, this was just the beginning. I was going to hit her where it would hurt the most. And when everything came crashing down, she wouldn't even see it coming. I wasn't going to waste any more time. Sarah had to feel every bit of what I'd been feeling since I discovered her betrayal. It was time for the first strike, the one she wouldn't expect. I made sure the evidence of her infidelity ended up in the hands of the right person, one of her biggest professional rivals. You see, Sarah hadn't just climbed the corporate ladder. She'd made a few enemies along the way. She liked to play the role of the perfect professional, always smiling, shaking hands, making nice with everyone, but behind the scenes, she was cutthroat. I knew exactly who would love to see her taken down a notch. It was almost too easy. I dropped some anonymous hints, shared a few incriminating photos that couldn't be explained away, and within days, the rumor mill started turning. By the time Sarah walked into the big client event, the whispers were already spreading like wildfire. She had no idea, of course. Why would she? As far as she knew, she was still in control, keeping her secrets safe. The event that night was packed. Everyone who mattered in her professional circle was there. Clients, bosses, and people who could make or break her career. I was there too, playing the part of the supportive husband, smiling at her side while she mingled and laughed with people who were about to turn their backs on her. It was almost poetic. I watched from a distance as the whispers reached her. At first, it was just a few sideways glances, then the quiet conversation started. Sarah noticed, of course. She was sharp, but she couldn't figure out what was happening. I could see the confusion growing on her face as she tried to make her way through the crowd, acting like everything was fine. Then came the moment. One of her colleagues, someone who used to have her back, cornered her. They didn't say much, but I could see the way they looked at her. The judgment, the disdain. Sarah had no idea how they'd found out. She stood there, stunned, as the realization hit her like a freight train. Her perfect little world was beginning to fall apart. I could see it in the way she was acting. She was rattled. At one point, she tried to pull me aside, asking if I thought something was going on. "Do you think someone's spreading rumors about me?" she asked, her voice shaky, like she was trying to convince herself more than anything else. I just shrugged and played dumb, telling her it was probably nothing, hiding the smirk that was tugging at my lips. Meanwhile, things with Claire were starting to get complicated. What had originally been part of my revenge plan was starting to evolve into something else. We were meeting in secret, keeping everything under wraps, but I could feel the tension building between us. It wasn't just about the physical side anymore. Though, sure, that was still part of it. Claire was beginning to get emotionally invested, and I could tell she was starting to sense that I wasn't in this for the reasons she thought. She asked me, more than once, if I was really ready to move on from Sarah, if this was truly what I wanted. I lied, of course. I told her what she wanted to hear. "Of course, I'm ready," I'd say, kissing her as if everything was fine, knowing full well that my mind was still completely focused on taking down Sarah. Claire wasn't stupid, though. She was starting to see through the cracks in my story, starting to suspect that I had other motives. But by then, she was too deep into it. She cared about me, or at least, she thought she did. I knew she wouldn't walk away now. But back to Sarah. After that event, everything started falling apart for her. Her reputation was in freefall. Clients were questioning her integrity. Colleagues were distancing themselves. And I watched all of it unfold with a twisted sense of satisfaction. I had set this all in motion, and there was no stopping it now. Still, she had no idea I was behind it. She started acting paranoid, accusing people at work of talking behind her back. She'd come home and vent to me, completely unaware of my involvement. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was the one pulling the strings, and she was so tangled up in her own lies that she couldn't see it. I started pushing her, little by little, trying to get her to admit what she had done. I'd make comments about trust, about loyalty, about how secrets always come out in the end. But every time, she denied it. She was stubborn as hell, refusing to admit what was right in front of her. I'd look her in the eyes and ask, "Are you sure there's nothing you need to tell me?" And every time, she'd look me dead in the eyes and say, "No, of course not." It was infuriating, but also kind of satisfying. She still thought she was in control. She had no idea the walls were closing in on her. And then there was Claire. She was starting to catch on. She wasn't dumb. She could feel the distance between us, even though we were still meeting up regularly. One day, she asked me, "Are you just using me to get back at your wife?" I'd always brush it off, but I could see the doubt in her eyes, the way she hesitated before letting things go further. I knew I had to make a decision soon. Either I'd keep using Claire as part of my plan, or I'd have to come clean. But for now, I was too focused on Sarah's downfall. The real show was just beginning, and I wasn't about to lose control of it. I'd been planning this moment for weeks. Every move I made, every piece of evidence I gathered, it was all leading to this. The day I would expose everything and finally show Sarah that I wasn't the clueless husband she thought I was. I wanted her to feel the humiliation, to realize the consequences of everything she'd done. And the best part? She had no idea it was coming. The lawyers had been involved for a while, but this was the day we'd sit down to discuss the divorce terms. But before any paperwork was signed, I had one last trick up my sleeve. I made sure her lawyer would be there too. He looked smug, probably thinking he was going to get her a sweet deal. He had no idea the bomb I was about to drop. We sat in the meeting room, Sarah, her lawyer, my lawyer, and me. She was dressed in her usual professional style, confident as always. But underneath that exterior, I could see she was on edge. Her career had been spiraling for weeks. Ever since the rumors about her affair started circulating, she was losing clients, colleagues weren't returning her calls, and her reputation was hanging by a thread. Still, she thought she was in control of me, of this divorce. How wrong she was. I slid the folder across the table, and as she opened it and started flipping through the evidence, photos, texts, emails, everything that tied her to her ex-husband and all the other men she'd been sneaking around with, I watched her face. It started to drain of color. Her hands were shaking as she said, "Where did you get this?" Her voice was low, filled with panic. I leaned back, crossing my arms, and said, "Did you really think I wouldn't find out, Sarah? You've been lying to me for years. You didn't just cheat. You lied about your entire life, and now it's all out in the open." Her lawyer tried to keep his composure, but even he looked rattled. "We can discuss this privately," he said, already scrambling to figure out how to salvage the situation. But I wasn't done. "Oh, I'm not interested in keeping this private," I said, my voice steady. "In fact, I think it's time we bring this out into the light. I'm tired of the lies, and I'm tired of playing nice." Sarah's face went pale. She knew what was coming, the final blow. I had arranged for the evidence to leak right before a major corporate dinner, one where all the key players in her professional world would be. By the time she walked into the event, everyone would know the truth. And it went exactly as I'd planned. When Sarah entered the room that night, the atmosphere shifted instantly. It was as if the room itself recoiled from her presence. People started avoiding her, moving away like she was radioactive. Sarah, still in the dark about the full scope of what had happened, tried to make the rounds, smiling and acting like everything was perfectly fine. But soon enough, the questions started. At first, they were subtle, curious remarks about her personal life, questions she couldn't easily deflect. Then someone, I can't even recall who, finally said it out loud. "So, how's your ex-husband doing? Still sneaking off to meet him on the side?" Sarah's face drained of color. She tried to keep her composure, but it was already too late. The damage had been done. The room had already turned against her. She stumbled over a half-baked excuse, laughing awkwardly, but no one bought it. The mask had cracked, and there was no hiding behind it anymore. The truth was out in the open now, and she couldn't salvage it. The facade she'd built for years collapsed right there, in front of everyone. It was over. In front of an audience, Sarah broke down. She tried to justify herself, blaming me, blaming her job, even blaming the strain of our marriage. But the more she spoke, the worse it got. The people who had once admired her, the friends she thought she could count on, they all turned their backs. The betrayal she had so carefully constructed was now unraveling before her eyes. I stood there, watching it all unfold with a sense of satisfaction I couldn't deny. The real payoff was just beginning. After the event, everything accelerated. The divorce was set in motion, but now I was the one holding all the cards. Sarah knew it, her lawyer knew it, and my lawyer had a self-assured look on his face as we began negotiating the terms. She tried to put up a fight, clinging to what little she had left, but I wasn't backing down. I made sure that she lost a substantial portion of our assets. All that she'd worked for in her career, gone. The life we'd built together, shattered. The meeting with the lawyers to finalize everything was tense. Sarah sat across from me, a shadow of the confident woman I had once known. Her lawyer did his best to salvage what he could, but the evidence was insurmountable. The affairs, the lies, the money spent on secret getaways, everything was laid bare. Sarah tried to make eye contact with me, perhaps hoping to talk her way out of this like she always did, but I wasn't having it. I was done. I said very little. I just nodded as my lawyer dismantled every argument her side tried to make. By the end of the meeting, it was clear that she had lost. After the papers were signed, Sarah tried one last desperate attempt to reach out. Dan, please, can we talk? I never meant for any of this to happen. We can fix this. You don't have to do this. I didn't even look at her. There's nothing to talk about, Sarah. You made your choices, and now you have to live with them. I walked out, leaving her there, watching the ruins of her life crumble around her. The divorce was finalized, and I walked away with the upper hand. Sarah? She had nothing. No career, no reputation, no friends. She was utterly alone. Once the divorce was finalized, I finally felt a weight lifting off my chest. The months of plotting, tracking, and planning my revenge had drained me, but the satisfaction was undeniable. I had come out with the majority of our assets, and Sarah? Her career was destroyed. The colleagues who once admired her were gone, and even her former lover wanted nothing to do with her. She was completely alone, and I had no regrets. But what came next wasn't what I expected. It wasn't just the satisfaction of watching Sarah fall that gave me peace. It was the realization that I had finally closed the chapter on that toxic relationship. For years, Sarah had been a constant burden, dragging me down, and now, with her out of the picture, I was free to focus on something new, something real. That's when things with Claire started to change. What had begun as part of my revenge plan had shifted into something more. Claire and I had been seeing each other for months. In the beginning, I'll admit, it was all about payback. But somewhere along the way, it stopped being about Sarah. Claire became more than just a distraction. I found myself actually looking forward to our time together, not just for the physical connection, but for the deeper bond we were beginning to build. It wasn't immediate. After everything I'd been through, I wasn't about to dive headfirst into another relationship without being cautious. I kept my guard up, and Claire could tell. She asked me about my past, about what I really wanted going forward. For once, I didn't have all the answers. But one thing was clear. I was done with revenge. I was tired of living in the past, tired of being defined by what had happened. I wanted something real, something built on trust, not manipulation or lies. As the weeks turned into months, Claire and I grew closer. We started talking about the future, about a fresh start, leaving behind the wreckage that had been my life with Sarah. We found a new place to call home. It wasn't anything extravagant, but it felt like a fresh beginning. A place where we could carve out a life that was entirely our own, without the weight of my past hanging over us. I even began thinking about opening a business with Claire. She had always been sharp, business savvy, and together. I felt like we had the potential to build something really meaningful, not just professionally, but personally too. It wasn't just about building a career. It was about building a life together. And for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful. The anger, the need for revenge, it all faded away. My focus shifted entirely to the future, to what we could create together. Meanwhile, Sarah was falling apart. I heard through the grapevine that she had left the city, trying to start fresh somewhere else, but the damage to her reputation had already been done. Every job she tried to land, her past followed her. No one was willing to hire someone with a history of betrayal and public humiliation. Even her family, the people who had always been by her side, started to pull away. They couldn't look past the lies, the affairs, the mess she had made of her life. A few months after the divorce, Sarah tried reaching out to me. I don't know what she expected. Maybe she thought I'd feel guilty, that I'd be open to some sort of reconciliation. But when I saw her name on my phone, I didn't even hesitate. I ignored her call, and then ignored the dozen more messages she left after that. She'd made her choices, and now she had to live with the fallout. I didn't know her anything. I heard she had fallen into a deep depression, struggling to hold her life together with no job, no friends, and nowhere to turn. There was a time, maybe, when I would have felt pity for her, when I might have considered helping. But not anymore. Sarah wasn't my problem. Not anymore. One evening, Claire and I caught up with some old friends, people who had known Sarah and had witnessed everything. They couldn't believe the transformation. "You look like a completely new man," one of them said. "It's incredible how much has changed." And they were right. I wasn't the same person I had been when this whole ordeal started. I wasn't the angry, bitter man obsessed with revenge. I had changed. I had grown. I wasn't defined by Sarah anymore, by what she had done to me. She was a chapter of my past, but she wouldn't define my future. As the evening wore on, the conversation eventually turned to Sarah, and someone asked, "So, how is she doing?" I just shrugged. "I don't really know. I don't keep up with her anymore." There was some surprise, of course. They expected me to still care, to have lingering feelings about her downfall. But I didn't. Sarah's life was her own mess to sort out. I had moved on, and for the first time in years, I felt truly free. That night, Claire and I left together, hand in hand, walking down a new path. My life had been torn apart, rebuilt, and transformed. And now, I was ready for whatever came next. Sarah was nothing but a memory, a reminder of who I used to be and just how far I had come.